Narcissists Who Fucked It Up, the Top 20, Part 5. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor, and we have now reached our final 4 on our journey through a list of narcissists that have really buggered things up. Who do you think has made the top 4? Who do you think are at the top of the tree when it comes to being narcissists who've entirely fucked up as a consequence of their narcissism? Well, you're about to find out. Number 4. Bernie Madoff. Madoff created the largest Ponzi scheme in history, so whilst he was a record breaker, it did not prevent him from winding up on a piss-stained mattress in a storm drain in Fucked-Upsville. He earned the title the Monster of Wall Street. Such was the extent of his fraud. In 1960, Madoff founded Burden L. Madoff Investment Securities LLC as a broker-dealer for penny stock with $5,000, equivalent to $49,000 in 2022, that he earned from working as a lifeguard and irrigation sprinkler installer, and a loan of $50,000 from his father-in-law, accountant Saul Alpern, who referred a circle of friends and their families. Thus, early on, Madoff started his tilt at Fucked-Upsville by fleecing family and friends. Such was the complete absence of moral fibre, and a man who not so much had a skewed moral compass, but never had one to begin with. Madoff was the first prominent practitioner of payment for order flow, whatever the fuck that means, in which a dealer pays a broker for the right to execute a customer's order. This has been called a legal kickback. Some academics have questioned the ethics of these payments. Madoff argued that these payments did not alter the price that the customer received. He viewed the payments as a normal business practice, which is hardly a surprise for someone who deems that it's entirely acceptable to fleece billions from people. David Sheehan, chief counsel to Trustee Pickard, stated on September 27, 2009, that about $36 billion was invested into the scam, with about $18 billion missing. In May 2011, Trustee Pickard said that the total amount owed to customers was $57 billion, of which $17 billion was actually invested by customers. The size of the fraud was stated as $65 billion early in the investigation into Madoff. Former SEC Chairman Harvey Pitt estimated the actual net fraud to be between $10 and $17 billion. Eric Arvedlund, who publicly questioned Madoff's reported investment performance in 2001, stated that the actual amount of the fraud might never be known, but was likely somewhere between $12 and $20 billion. Whichever way you look at it, Madoff defrauded people of billions, and in so doing, enjoyed a wealthy and privileged lifestyle himself. Court documents show that Bernard Madoff and his wife Ruth lived a life of high luxury, with exclusive homes, yachts, and other assets worth $823 million. This included a $7 million Manhattan apartment, a $1 million house in the exclusive Cap d'Antibes in the south of France, another in New York State, and an $11 million house in Palm Beach, Florida. Aside from the real estate, the disclosure lists nearly $10 million worth of furniture and art, and a $7 million yacht named Bull, quite apt for somebody who spoke so much of it. Long known for lavish taste, the Madoffs are revealed to have owned $2.6 million in jewellery, a $39,000 Steinway piano, and $65,000 worth of silverware in their New York apartment alone. Tens of thousands of dollars were spent at their various houses on security, and they paid $3,448 a month just to maintain the Florida yacht. Bernie was enjoying the life of luxury, creamed off the back of the money of other people, and in 2008, there was an advertisement inviting people to come to Fucked-Upsville and get to know your inner shit. Bernie, most likely chomping on a big cigar, wearing some garish Versace shirt, smoothed back his hair and said, "Now, I'll have some of that." And so, it was off to Fucked-Upsville Bernie went. Accordingly, on December the 10th, 2008, Madoff's sons, Mark and Andrew, told authorities that their father had confessed to them that the asset management unit of his firm was a massive Ponzi scheme, and quoted him as saying it was one big lie. The following day, agents from the FBI arrested Madoff and charged him with 1 count of securities fraud. The US Securities and Exchange Commission had previously conducted multiple investigations into his business practices, but had not uncovered the massive fraud. On March 12, 2009, Madoff pleaded guilty to 11 federal felonies and admitted to turning his wealth management business into a massive Ponzi scheme. The loser didn't even bother to put up a fight, but instead rolled over like the lazy pig he was and copped to the allegations, making his journey to Fucked-Upsville swift and prompt. In his plea, Madoff stated that he began his Ponzi scheme in 1991. He admitted he had never made any legitimate investments with his clients' money during this time. Instead, he said he simply deposited the money into his personal business account at Chase Manhattan Bank. When his customers asked for withdrawals, he paid them out of the Chase account. A classic robbing Peter to pay Paul scenario. Even his scheme smacked of Fucked-Upsville, as it was hardly sophisticated, and it cemented his very deserved attendance in Fucked-Upsville. On June 29, 2009, Madoff was sentenced to 150 years in prison, the maximum sentence allowed. On April 14, 2021, he died at the Federal Medical Center Butner in North Carolina from chronic kidney disease. A serial scammer who lived the high life and could not be bothered to earn a living legitimately, and was such a dosser that he didn't even sprinkle some charisma around and entertainers like Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street, and instead gave up, issued a limp-wristed apology, and found himself getting 150 years in the big house before expiring. His ghost now haunts a latrine in Fucked-Upsville, where Lance Armstrong gets the willies every time he goes for a dump, with the spectral vision of Bernie mumbling his apology, "I have left a legacy of shame, as some of my victims have pointed out, to my family and my grandchildren. This is something I will live for with the rest of my life. I'm sorry, I know that doesn't help you." Even his apology is shit, and is straight out of Fucked-Upsville. Number 3. Elizabeth Holmes. With a voice like she smokes 40 Rothmans a day, Holmes showed so much promise. In 2015, Forbes had named Holmes the youngest and wealthiest self-made female billionaire in the United States, on the basis of a $9 billion valuation of her company. She appeared to have revolutionized blood testing by developing a company that used a method of testing using only a pin-prick, relieving nurses around the world of the arse-ache of trying to find a vein when all they want to do is go home and watch an episode of Pointless and eat chocolate digestives. Apparently wealthy, brainy, doing good work, and not too shoddy to look at either, it was little wonder that Holmes was seen as promising so much. However, the signs were there that she would end up in Fucked-Upsville. After all, her father used to work for Enron, so the stench of massive failure was bound to infect the Holmes dynasty at some point. In 2003, Holmes founded the company Real Time Cures in Palo Alto, California, to democratize healthcare. Holmes described her fear of needles as a motivation and sought to perform blood tests using only small amounts of blood. When Holmes pitched the idea to reap vast amounts of data from a few droplets of blood derived from the tip of a finger to her medicine professor, Phyllis Gardner, at Stanford, Gardner responded, "I don't think your idea is going to work," explaining it was impossible to do what Holmes was claiming could be done. Several other expert medical professors told Holmes the same thing. Holmes wasn't going to accept some brush-off from Tefal-headed boffins, not a chance. She knew better, and therefore Holmes did not relent, and she succeeded in getting her advisor and dean at the School of Engineering, Channing Robertson, to back her idea. In 2003, Holmes renamed the company Theranos, a portmanteau of therapy and diagnosis. Robertson became the company's first board member and introduced Holmes to venture capitalists. Despite this promising start, it was clear that Holmes was a wrong-un and destined to be eating scraps from the bins in Fucked-Upsville because she couldn't be asked to create her own image and decided instead that she would be an admirer of Apple founder Steve Jobs and deliberately copied his style, frequently dressing in a black turtleneck sweater, as Jobs did. Holmes said her mother dressed her in black turtlenecks when she was young, and that she had worn the turtlenecks beginning around the age of 8. But then she also claimed that she started wearing black turtlenecks upon founding the company in 2003. Shaping up her credentials for Fucked-Upsville, Holmes couldn't even get her story straight, and it went further when an employee said she suggested Holmes copy Jobs' famous Issey Miyake turtle luck in 2007. Now, the only turtle she gets near is the turtle's head she experiences when she needs a dump, but is too frightened to use the latrine haunted by Bernie Madoff. Theranos continued racking up the Fucked-Upsville credits, and Holmes did so with her ridiculous voice. During most of her public appearances, she spoke in a deep baritone voice, although a former Theranos colleague later claimed he heard her speak in a voice stereotypical of a woman her age to welcome him when he was hired. Gardner of Stanford also denies that Holmes has a naturally deep voice. In a 2023 New York Times interview, Holmes spoke in her natural, higher-pitched voice and confirmed that the low voice was an affectation. Talking like a man, wearing a turtleneck, Holmes ploughed on. By December 2004, Holmes had raised $6 million to fund the firm. By the end of 2010, Theranos had more than $92 million in venture capital. In July 2011, Holmes was introduced to former Secretary of State George Shultz. After a 2-hour meeting, he joined the Theranos board of directors. Holmes was recognized for forming the most illustrious board in U.S. corporate history over the next 3 years. Holmes operated the company in stealth mode, without press releases or a company website until September 2013, when the company announced a partnership with Walgreens to launch in-store blood sample collection centers. She was interviewed for Medscape by its editor-in-chief, Eric Topol, who praised her for this phenomenal rebooting of laboratory medicine. Media attention increased in 2014, when she appeared on the covers of Fortune, Forbes, and the New York Times style magazine. Forbes recognized Holmes as the world's youngest self-made female billionaire and ranked her at number 110 on the Forbes 400 in 2014. By the end of 2014, her name appeared on 18 US patents and 66 foreign patents. Old Deep Voice was kicking ass and taking names. But then a flyer for Fucked-Upsville was shoved into Holmes's hand when she was out shopping for black turtlenecks, and it invited her to fuck it all up and come to Fucked-Upsville, where there's a loser on every corner. Intrigued, Holmes decided that Fucked-Upsville may well be the place for her. The decline of Theranos began in 2015 when a series of journalistic and regulatory investigations revealed doubts about the company's claims and whether Holmes had misled investors and the government. In 2018, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission charged Theranos, Holmes and former Theranos Chief Operating Officer Ramesh Sunny Balwani with raising $700 million from investors through a massive fraud involving false or exaggerated claims about the accuracy of the company's blood testing technology. Holmes settled the charges by paying a $500,000 fine, returning 18.9 million shares to the company, relinquishing her control of Theranos in terms of voting, and accepting a 10-year ban from serving as an officer or director of a public company. In June 2018, a federal grand jury indicted Holmes and Balwani on fraud charges. Her trial ended in January 2022, when Holmes was convicted of defrauding investors and acquitted of defrauding patients. She was sentenced to serve 11 1/4 years in prison, beginning on May 30th, 2023. She and Balwani were fined $452 million to be paid to the victims of the fraud. Holmes was once the blue-eyed girl promising a revolution in the method of blood testing, courting money, fame, and praise, and instead, because basically she had a product which was shit because it didn't work, and she couldn't be bothered to try and make it work, She got caught out, had her pants pulled down, and her bottom was roundly smacked by sending her to prison and dropping a huge fine on her. Off to Fucked-Upsville went another narcissist, where she hides behind the bushes and jumps out on Anthony Weiner, making deep booming noises, before breaking down and sobbing into her last remaining black turtleneck. Number 2. Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein was minted. When he was offed, or offed himself, depending on who you believe, he had around $578 million. Not only that, the degenerate spent his time molesting young women as he pleased on his pervert island and his various homes, and undoubtedly had a safe full of videos, photographs, and names of the rich and powerful he shuttled on the Lolita Express to his sleaze island, and ensured that whilst they continued his tradition of sex-related chicanery with trafficked women, he racked up the blackmail points. Epstein had an early brush with Fucked-Upsville in 2005, when there was the suggestion that the morally bereft and ethically bankrupt noncing machine was going to end up living in a drained swimming pool, with spaces reserved for Bill Cosby and R. Kelly. In 2005, police in Palm Beach, Florida, began investigating Epstein after a parent reported that he had sexually abused her 14-year-old daughter. Epstein pleaded guilty and was convicted in 2008 by a Florida state court of procuring a child for prostitution and of soliciting a prostitute. He served almost 13 months in custody, but with extensive work release, he was convicted of only these 2 crimes as part of a controversial plea deal. Federal officers had identified 36 girls, some as young as 14 years old, whom Epstein had allegedly sexually abused. Notwithstanding this, he was not hauled off to Fucked-Upsville as you might think. Instead, he continued to make money, make connections, and carry on being a pervert like nothing had ever happened. Clearly an edgelord of the highest order, Epstein decided it was time for another flirtation with Fucked-Upsville, evidently believing that he could dance around the edges of making a move and then, like a blue-balling first date, back off and decide he was never going to move there. Epstein was arrested again on July 6, 2019, on federal charges for the sex trafficking of minors in Florida and New York. The fuckwit, however, didn't even get down to dealing with the criminal charges. After having danced around for years and making it seem that he would never end up in Fucked-Upsville, he decided to go all in and make an immediate move there. This was not done through a guilty plea, but instead shuffling off this mortal coil. He died in his jail cell on August 10, 2019. The medical examiner ruled that his death was suicide by hanging. Epstein's lawyers have disputed the ruling, and there has been significant public skepticism about the true cause of his death, resulting in numerous conspiracy theories. Since Epstein's death precluded the possibility of pursuing criminal charges against him, a judge dismissed all criminal charges on August 29, 2019. He may have escaped charges, but he didn't escape Fucked-Upsville, as he went from wealth, influence, and abusing women wherever he chose to carking it in a shitty little cell, as Satan dragged his whimpering soul to Fucked-Upsville and tethered it to a lightning-blasted tree on the main road into Fucked-Upsville, where dogs regularly relieve themselves, and Epstein can be heard to whine, "Killane," on winter nights. Our litany of loser narcissists has seen a roll call of those who have fucked up, tumbling from lofty heights, some falling further than others, but all falling in some way, many winding up in jail as confirmation of their standing in the top 20. But now it is time to find out who heads our list of narcissist bugger-ups, the individual who resides at the top of the tree for having snatched defeat from the jaws of victory, for engaging in a monumental cock-up. Can you guess who it is? Epstein came in at number 2, as he lost his life as a consequence of his fucked-upness and the subsequent move to Fucked-Upsville. But our number 1 spot emulates Epstein in some respects, but also surpasses him. The number 1 spot goes to Stockton Rush. He may not have been as wealthy as many on our list, and he certainly was not, at least until recently, as well known as many on our list. But did Mr. Submersible really fuck it up by managing to not only kill himself, but his passengers too, surpassing anything else done by anybody else on our list? Yes, Captain Arrogant was so certain of his technical ability and subaquatic knowledge that he ignored all warnings sent his way by people who actually knew what they were talking about. He created a sub made out of carbon fibre and may as well have made it out of a cornflakes packet when titanium was the accepted material, and he then decided to charge people large sums of money to gamble with their lives by joining him in his knock-together submersible controlled with essentially an Xbox controller, and where you took a shit behind a curtain. The level of fucked up hubris of this cocksure narcissist caused all the hubris gauges at the University of Hubris to not only hit the maximum, but explode in a shower of self-absorbed, shitty pseudo-explorer heroism. Utterly convinced of his own brilliance, he discounted the potential risks and headed off to a pancaked, watery grave, consigning innocent passengers to the same fate, whilst leading rescue services on an expensive and ultimately fruitless series of rescue missions. This man, in a matter of moments, did not just move to Fucked Upsville, he became mayor of Fucked Upsville, by virtue of his headstrong, narcissistic, self-obsessed, look-at-me approach to safety. Quite content to take safety rules and take an R. Kelly piss all over them, Stockton Rush, known as Tock to his friends, and ought to have been known as Complete Cock, ensured that his narcissism resulted in not only his own death, and the death of others, and entrusted those to his care ended up dead also. Accordingly, as a consequence of offing himself and others in an astonishing show of arrogance and tumbling from a position of running his own company to ending up dead, he finds himself sat as mayor of Fucked Upsville and number 1 on our list. If you have enjoyed the top 20 of fuck-ups by narcissists, do feel free to share all of the videos, make sure that you've liked them, and you can also show super thanks to your glorious narrator for all his hard work to ensure that the Dirts Fund is topped up with some delicious dirt champagne to ensure that this chocolatey, velvety stentorian voice remains lubricated. Thank you very much for joining me whilst we worked our way through this list. Look out for more in the not-too-distant future. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.